Live, and we are welcoming people into the room for the live session. Give people just a few seconds to come into the room. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We know we have poets from around the country. We got people from around the country just for fun, just to get the chat moving here. If you could put in what city you're zooming in from. Let's see who's the farthest and the closest here. Just put in the chat, if you would, where you are. And as people are doing that, I'm going to go ahead and officially start the session with a good afternoon here in the Bay Area, and welcome to day 4 of the SCORES Poetry Summit, Words in Action. I'm so excited for this session today that we have, featuring these amazing voices from the National Student Poets Program, the 5 representatives from 2020, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. My name is Colin Schmidt. I'm the CEO of America SCORES Bay Area. We have a program serving thousands of students, elementary and middle school students, working with public schools to provide a magical mix of soccer and poetry and service learning. We're part of a national network of America SCORES. We're in 11 cities. We have over 1,000 writing coaches and over 12,000 poet athletes around the country. Again, we're honored to have such an incredible lineup here today. We thank you for being here, for arranging your schedules. Shout out to Hannah from the arts and writing program, writing and arts program. We'll talk a little bit more about that here as we go, but Hannah, thank you, especially for pulling this together. And I'm going to introduce Olivia in a minute here, who helped start the program and is going to serve as our moderator. I'm going to tell you more about her in just a minute. 2 matters of business. I got to thank our sponsors, Soma Equity Partners and the SAC Brand Group, for helping us bring this community together, to bring these voices together. And I also need to read a poem from a SCORES student poet athlete, as we like to call our people here. And it goes like this. It says, "I am brave." And this is actually a group poem from 4th grade team over at Think College Now in Oakland. "I am a superhero who fights against bad people. My superpower is kindness. I will use my superpowers to help kind people who struggle to use their voice. Sometimes it's not easy to be brave because some people can be really mean and make it hard to speak up to them. I show that I am brave when I use my voice and show kindness to bad people. I will change the world by being a leader and teaching people how to do good things. I will make myself heard, and I will say this in my poem: I will lift up my community when I see we need love. I will be the change I want to see." Yay, to Think College Now. We always just want to put those student poet athletes' voices in here. All right, last public service announcement here is somebody in the crowd today will be winning a SCORES gift bag, poetry gift bag, and it will include 2 tickets to our upcoming event, Rising Voices, which features several of our poet athletes and professional spoken word artist Brandon Leak, who won America's Got Talent. He won all the Golden Buzzer champion was a spoken word poet. How about that for poetry being hot right now? So anyways, we hope to see some of you there. And now, though, I'm going to turn it over to Olivia, who's been so kind to participate in this and connect so many dots for us to make this happen. Olivia has a long list of accomplishments. I'm going to touch a few of them. She has a career in government and politics and communications that's addressed youth and arts and gender equity issues and initiatives. She's currently working with California First partner Jennifer Siebel Newsom on a nonprofit that they co-founded together almost a year ago, the California Partners Project, which is promoting leadership in gender equity and in well-being, child well-being, family well-being. She's on the board of You Speaks and she is a founder of the National Student Poets Program that came out of the Obama President's Committee of the Arts and the Humanities. And here we are. And Olivia lives in San Francisco with her husband, with 2 dogs, a tween and a teen. And we're hoping to see one or all of those people in the background here. Olivia, thank you so much for being here. And I want to turn it over to you and to introduce the program and the poets that we're so glad to have as part of the summit.
Thank you, Colin. It is so great to be here. It's such a treat to be with all 5 National Student Poets. Thank you for that introduction. Every year, the National Student Poets Program identifies the top 5 youth poets in the nation to invest in as artists and to ask to serve as ambassadors for poetry. It's rare, and we're so lucky to have all 5 of them assembled and with us today. Poets, in the spirit of scores, which pairs poetry with soccer, as I introduced you, and I'm going to ask you what sport you played as a kid, and if that's a total non-starter for you, tell us your spirit animal instead. I grew up on a farm, so horseback riding was my jam if I wasn't writing poetry. So introductions from representing the Midwest region. Maddy Dietz from St. Paul, Minnesota. Matt.
Hi. Hi, I'm Maddy Dietz, and the sport I played when I was younger was volleyball, and I wasn't very good at it, but it was a lot of fun.
Excellent. And representing the West, Manasi Garg from Saratoga, California. What was your sport or spirit animal?
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here, and I'm located right here in the Bay. And I used to swim competitively all the way until high school. And I don't know why I did, because I didn't really enjoy it. But
probably because your swim team didn't also write poetry together. That could have brought the joy. Our Southwest region representative is Isabella Ramirez. Hello, Isabella.
Hi, everyone. Actually, as a kid, I played soccer, so I have actually a direct connection with, I never combined the two in poetry and soccer, but maybe one day. And I also did dance and gymnastics.
Triple threat. And from representing the Southwest, Ethan Wong from Katy, Texas.
I'm Ethan Wong. When I was a kid, I mostly played tennis, but for a short stint of time, I did like FFPS, so I guess that counts as soccer.
And last but not least, from the Northeast, Anthony Wiles joining us. I think, did you say you're in Pittsburgh, Anthony? Yeah. Where are you right now?
Pittsburgh, just outside of Pittsburgh. Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony Wiles. I actually played a bunch of sports when I was little. So some of them were baseball and football, and I ran track as well. I wasn't really good at any of them, so I kind of stopped after middle school.
So seeing you all, gosh, what a joy. Thank you. It's been harder than usual to come by joy this year, I think. And in my work, as Colin said, I work on child well-being through the California Partners Project. There's been a lot of data circulating about adolescent anxiety and depression being on the upswing after a year of shutdown and virtual school, et cetera. It's real, it's present. I think of poetry as a kind of insistence on feeling all the feelings, not turning away from things that are difficult or glossing over hard bits. Does that resonate with you? And how has your creative process been impacted by COVID and everything that came with it? Free for all, jump ball, oh, wrong sport.
Yeah, I've definitely incorporated poetry in the way that I like process this past while, but especially this year, when a family friend of mine passed away. I actually wrote a whole bunch of pieces surrounding him in order to like have a piece of him still exist in the world. So I think poetry can be really healing in that respect, because you're creating something that was not there before and something that will remain
I definitely think COVID, for what it's worth, actually helped me as a poet, especially when I write about myself, because up until the quarantine, I really wasn't writing about myself. I was writing about my world, I was writing about other people, other places, you know, and COVID, despite all the death that it has brought, despite all the loss, despite, like, for instance, I'm immunocompromised, I haven't been back to schools like since over a year ago. I've suffered immensely, but as a poet, I've grown and I've learned so much, not only about the art of poetry, but about myself, because for the first time in what I would think would be my entire life, I was able to sit with myself and sit with my feelings and make sense not only of my world, but like, how am I interpreting this world? And like, how is this world that I'm always constantly writing about, constantly talking about, how is it impacting me? How is it making me feel? So I definitely think like this quarantine, COVID pandemic situation has helped me as a writer be able to honestly and deeply think about myself and write about myself in a way that is both healing, um, and helps me create change.
For myself and my experience, I actually, in the beginning of a pandemic, felt partly a writer's block almost, because I felt so kind of overwhelmed with what was going on outside of me that I didn't know how to channel that in the beginning. But, since it's been progressed, and kind of like what Anthony was saying, I think being with myself and kind of really digging deep and being able to reflect, I've written some of my favorite pieces during the pandemic and this year, because I've been able to kind of sit in a space where it wasn't, none of my poetry really felt forced. It felt like it came naturally to me, and it was something that it was my response and my way of healing. So I think that what really the pandemic has showed me in terms of my poetry is like how it's for me, it's a response to things that happen to me, and it's always been like that. But I think in this time, it really, the way that it slowed down my life and really kind of abruptly came, showed me that more than ever.
I just wanted to say real quick that I totally agree with, especially the first part of what Isabella said. Like, during the first part of the pandemic, like, I didn't even realize it at first because I wasn't thinking, I barely thought about anything. I feel like I was just really numb to everything. So then afterwards, like, there was, after a period of time, I realized, wow, I haven't like felt the urge to write in a long time. And it was really weird because I was thinking, like, I'd expect that if I had so many like weird, like traumatic, almost traumatic things happen to me in the same period of time, like I would like immediately want to write about it. And it wasn't until like relatively recently, like maybe a few months ago or so, until I realized I started getting that urge again when something would happen. And then I like felt like I almost got back into a kind of rhythm of writing again. But it felt a lot different. I definitely agree that it felt a lot different after what happened in COVID for a variety of reasons. I guess I just changed a lot as a person because of the whole thing.
I'm thinking all of us, it's just so interesting that you said that, Ethan. I think as we transition out of this weird, surreal era, there'll be some of that, like, I don't know, the processing, and hopefully creativity can come out of that. Manasi, as you said, you're our hometown girl for this Bay Area event. And your interests as an artist, I think you've used poetry to translate trauma and examine immigration, which are so relevant to us in this region right now. Are there local issues you've been following and addressing through your poetry?
I think for me, like, a lot of my work isn't necessarily about me. It's kind of about like history and just the stories around me. So I think like the pandemic almost had the opposite effect on me, in that I felt cut off from a lot of my sources, like stimulation and inspiration. So it's been really difficult for me, I think. And like, I think there's just been so much going on that it's been very difficult for me to try and like, process it not just mentally, but also through like words. That part has, I feel like I've had like a block for a long time. But I think like something that kind of, obviously, like there has been like a huge upsurge in like very violent attacks against the Asian community, and in the Bay Area especially, a lot of the attacks have been here. I think like a week ago, like a couple was attacked outside of like the Range 99, that's like 10 minutes from our house. And there's just there have been like a lot of rallies and stuff locally and across the Bay. And I think that's like kind of started to like, I think, wake something up inside of me. I think just because a lot of my friends are East and Southeast Asian, and it's just something that's like directly affecting a lot of the people that I love. And I think going even deeper into that, I think I've started to like really consider what it means to be Asian American or Indian American. And it's just, I think that's something that I've like, now that I've started writing again after like almost a year of just feeling like a lot of writer's block, it's like that like identity thing is something that really interests me. Is I think like as a demographic, Asians are not very united the way other minority groups are, just because there's so many of us under one umbrella. There's a lot of divisions within our community. So it's interesting to me to see how, and also like as a group, a lot of us are still immigrating here from like our home countries and stuff. So I think in the future, like to me, it's just really interesting to me to see how, as a group, are we going to be able to form a collective identity, across Southeast and East Asians, or are we going to, I don't know, stay divided almost? And I think those are some themes that I've been exploring recently in my work that really speak to me.
So thank you for sharing that. Anthony, let's talk about joy. Actually, all of us, let's talk about joy. You guys truly do bring me joy. This program brings me joy and hope. I think they're closely related. I think, Valerie June and Dolly Parton also bring me joy. I feel like we share at least one of those touchstones. Can you share with us what else brings you joy?
I'm sorry, my dog is in the background and my parents are just getting home, so there's going to be a little bit of noise while I talk, so I apologize. Definitely, well, of course, music has always impacted me. I've always loved listening to music. I'm growing up in a household where music was always present, and also just like my family and spending time with them, especially now during COVID, it really helps me to stay grounded and remember in a way, like the good times, because I look back on my childhood and so many like things like New Year's dinners or things that I took for granted. It's like, they'll always be here. These people will always be here. They feel in a way more important now, just looking back at them and looking at those memories. And also I'm a big reader and I love doing research as well. I've always loved history and studying genealogy. So that's one of my passions that really both brings me joy in a way because it helps me. I'll say, like, as an African-American person, it was very hard to trace my genealogy, but then also like other people can trace back and know where they come from. I didn't know that. I know a few names and that was it. And I just kept doing research. And I really was able to find connections to these people who sacrificed, and, looking at records, because that's really all I have. I don't have photographs. I don't have these stories, but looking at trying to piece together their stories gave me joy, because I was able to, sorry, my sister, I was able to connect with my ancestors in a way that I hadn't previously been able to. So I really just think like finding that connection to my people, both like culturally as a whole during this time, but then also it's like my people, my ancestors, these are the families, these are the people that I come from, and these are the people who sacrificed and they live their day-to-day lives, not thinking that, say, 100, 200 years from now, their great-great-great-grandson would be a national student poet. I mean, to me, there's just something in that, just looking back and saying like, wow, these people, I'm the culmination of their wildest dreams. They didn't even know how to read and write, like, and look at where I'm at now. So I think that in and of itself gives me so much joy and so much pride. And it really helps me to fuel my work and to be better.
That is awesome. That is hopeful and joyful. I carry a poem called Joy in my wallet that's been there forever. And it's by Carl Dennis. There's a line, it's an insult to joy if I rank her merely as another handmaid to justice. I like to remember that joy isn't necessarily something you earn. Sometimes it's just a gift from the universe. Will you guys share a poem or a line, but definitely a poem if you have a poem that is a touchstone for you or that brings you joy?
So there's this poem, and to be honest, like the way I found it was pretty haphazard. I was like doing something for school probably, or like a speech event, trying to find a poem I'd want to like read or perform for that one. And I found one by Young Lee. It's called From Blossoms. And I'm not really sure why, but it's like the first time I read it, I just really liked the scene that he painted in the poem. And I guess to share with it, I'll just read like the last little bit of it because it's probably my favorite, the ending. And it goes, there are days we live as if death were nowhere in the background, from joy to joy to joy, from wing to wing, from blossom to blossom to impossible blossom, to sweet impossible blossom. And I would like to say I didn't even realize that the word joy was in there, but I guess that connects pretty nicely with what we were just talking about. But yeah, there's just something about that poem that like calms me down every time I read it.
Can you put that in the chat so we can, folks can read the whole poem? Thank you, that was great. Other National Student Poets with lines or poems to read?
There's one poem that I really love called Sorrow Is Not My Name by Ross Gay, and it's after one of Gwendolyn Brooks's poems. Let me see which line I should read. Okay, I'll just read the first couple lines. Sorrow is not my name. No matter the pull toward brink, no matter the florid, deep sleep awaits. There is a time for everything. Should I keep reading or should I just stop? Okay, yeah.
I say go, unless right? We're here to talk poetry.
Okay, I'll just start over then.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorrow is not my name. No matter the pull toward brink, no matter the florid, deep sleep awaits. There is a time for everything. Look, just this morning, a vulture nodded his red, grizzled head at me, and I looked at him, admiring the sickle of his beak. Then the wind kicked up, and after arranging that good suit of feathers, he up and took off, just like that. And to boot, there are, on this planet alone, something like 2 million naturally occurring sweet things, some with names so generous as to kick the steel from my knees. Agave, persimmon, stickball, the purple okra I bought for $2 at the market. Think of that. The long night, the skeleton in the mirror, the man behind me on the bus taking notes. Yeah. But look, my niece is running through a field calling my name. My neighbor sings like an angel, and at the end of my block is a basketball court. I remember. My color's green. I'm spring.
Thank you. Maddy or Isabella or Anthony?
I have a portion of a poem. It's the first one that came to my mind, The Leash by Aidan Limon. Here it is. marvel at how the dog runs straight toward the pickup trucks breaknecking down the road because she thinks she loves them, because she's sure, without a doubt, that the loud roaring things will love her back, her soft, small self alive with the desire to share her enthusiasm, until I yank back the leash to save her because I want her to survive forever. Don't die, I say, and we decide to walk for a bit longer, starlings high and fevered above us, winter coming to lay her cold corpse down upon this little plot of earth. Perhaps we are always hurtling our body toward the thing that will obliterate us, begging for love from the speeding passage of time, and so maybe, like the dog obedient at my heels, we can walk together peacefully, at least until the next truck comes.
I love that poem. I've read it, but it's even better hearing it from you.
Sorry. Did I interrupt someone? Okay, I'll go ahead. I love this poem by Nikki Giovanni because, as I mentioned before, just looking back, especially during COVID, which was when I discovered this poem, looking back at a lot of like my childhood years, summers have always been such a highlight. And I just love this poem that she writes when she talks about summer. It's called Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'll read it because it's a pretty short one. I always like summer best. You can eat fresh corn from Daddy's garden, and okra and greens and cabbage and lots of barbecue and buttermilk and homemade ice cream at the church picnic, and listen to gospel music outside at the church homecoming, and go to the mountains with your grandmother and go barefooted and be warm all the time, not only when you go to bed and sleep. It's simple and sweet, and I love it so much.
I would say my poem is a little bit different because I think for me, coming from a slam poetry background and a spoken word background, I find the most joy in consuming videos of spoken word poets, and especially when I think of what it produces the most joy in me, I think of like humorous poems. And one of my favorite poems is by Melissa Losa Oliva, and it's called How to Survive the Zombie Apocalypse as an 82-year-old Guatemalan grandmother. And it's just a really like fun and lighthearted poem that I don't have a transcript. I've been looking for it, but really it's best in video form, and it's quite long, but it's just one of the things that I come back to if I'm ever feeling down, because it always just makes me laugh. And I think anybody that wants a good laugh and a little bit of poetry should definitely check that out.
Awesome. Thank you. And if you are so moved to put a link to it in the chat, go for it. Maddy, or again, anyone who wants to, can you describe what a National Student Poet is and does, and how you might become one?
Sure thing. So the National Student Poet Program is centered around like making poetry more available to youth and all people across the country. So the main thing we do as National Student Poets is we put together a year-long service project where we dedicate our time and our like poetic energy to making something, workshops, readings, a zine, anything you can think of to put out there in the world to help raise awareness about poetry and to give people time and space and support to use their own voices in a poetical way. And you can become a National Student Poet through the Scholastic Arts and Writing Awards through their poetry application.
Cool. Thank you. And so Maddy talked about the service component, which is also something that SCORES does. Do you guys, you're pretty well along in planning your service projects by now. And Ethan, you're working with middle schoolers, is that right?
Yeah.
You guys mind sharing a little bit about your service projects?
Yeah, okay. So right now, what I'm looking at is I'm still in the process so far of like reaching out to people, but I have a plan set up. The idea is to get working with Wits Houston as like a big part of it. I have like reaching out to certain middle schools and stuff in my area, especially. I've just started like still waiting on some news from like people in my administration, but the whole idea is to just set up these like almost impromptu workshops and to get like these middle schoolers and reach out to them in some way to get them interested in poetry. Like at the very least, get them like to write more, because I know that if you're coming to a workshop, you're already like kind of into it, but the whole idea is to just get them to get more into it. And I think that middle school is a good time to start that, especially because that's when I started personally.
I know we should talk service projects, and we will, but I can't help following up on that. How did you start in middle school? What can you tell us about that? Your entry into being a poet?
So what's interesting about that is, believe it or not, like half the reason I think that I actually started writing poetry was because of the Scholastic program to begin with, because my teacher wanted me to submit something, and then we had like a poetry assignment in class. And then they were like, oh yeah, just go ahead, like submit this thing. We all encourage you to go ahead and submit poetry to Scholastic. But after that year's assignment, the next year, the same time rolled around, and I decided I was still interested in doing it. So then I started writing poetry on my own, and that just kind of spiraled, I guess, out of control. I don't know if that's exactly the right way to put it.
Thank you. Others with your service projects? Meanwhile, I'm going to address the dog at the door.
I can talk briefly. I'm going to be hosting a series of workshops in local schools across Minnesota to give elementary students, sorry, I keep losing my train of thought, elementary students some workshop experience using curriculum that I wrote actually for my Girl Scouts Gold Award, which is a separate service project event that's like an over 80 hours service project. So kind of combining those two things, which I'm really excited about.
Have you guys it's a different year, right? And in the past, you would have done some workshops with younger kids by now. Have you been able to do that this year? And if so, what have you learned?
Maddy and I actually did a workshop with the DC branch of SCORES in February. Maddy, I don't know if you want to talk more about it, or I can go.
By all means, go ahead.
Okay, and then I'll like pass it over to you. But yeah, we worked with youth, I believe it was grades 3 through 5. And when I tell you, like, these were the most impressive group of like younger kids that I've like not even worked with, like that I've met in my entire life. Like the poetry that came out of that workshop blew me away. Like that just shows just how impactful the arts are for youth, and that really inspires that, like to this day, like it just inspires me so much. And I really enjoyed working with them. It was a brief workshop. I believe it was only about an hour or so long, but you could see that it had an effect on the kids, and really that they had an effect on us. So I feel really satisfied with that.
I share Anthony's sentiments like entirely. It was such an incredible workshop, and it was such a joy to get to work with DC SCORES. I'd never been in an environment that specifically taught poetry to kids and taught in terms of like also like athletic soccer stuff as well, which was such a cool mix. And it was incredible to get to work with the kids and work with the fine folks at DC SCORES. And so I'm really happy to be here at the SCORES Summit.
What did you guys use as your prompts?
We started out with an icebreaker activity where we wanted the students to introduce themselves, but in a satirical poem, which was really, I was blown away just like from the get-go with that. And then we did an exercise called 1, 2, 3 words about me, where they had to respond to a prompt with only like 1 word or 2 words or 3 words. And just in of itself is a vocabulary exercise for poetry, since, you know, in poetry, every word counts. But even then I was astounded. Maddy, do you want to talk about, Maddy did her own section that was equally fantastic. So I'm gonna let her talk about that.
Yeah, we wrote all of our own like prompts and exercises, which was so fun. The part that I led was about using like humor and the tools of humor, like sarcasm and hyperbole, to frame your life and to be able to like poke fun at difficult circumstances and kind of take power over things that feel like too big for words sometimes.
So good. Okay, we have some questions coming in. We also have a request for you guys to each read one of your poems. So while you're getting ready to do that, does anyone else want to talk about their service project?
Sure, I'll go. For
Okay.
my service project, I'm looking to engage specifically about spoken word and slam poetry because I've mentioned before that is my background. And I think I'm really interested in kind of exposing people to that new format of poetry. And specifically, I want to kind of work with an older group of kids because a lot of the topics that I tackle are like social justice. And I really want to talk about using that as using poetry as advocacy is what my main goal is with my project. And one of the things that I'm doing for National Poetry Month is that I will be doing a poetry reading with a library in Florida with a group of 12 to 18-year-olds. So it's a pretty wide range, but still in the teen range. And I'll be doing kind of like a poetry reading of some of my work and also a Q&A and talking to teens about how I got involved in slam poetry and how they can get involved as well. So my main goal is to really specifically teach people how poetry can live beyond paper and can really be part of their voice and part of building self-esteem as well.
Thank you. Okay, one question. Do any of you, any or all of you read very much poetry in translation from other cultures or countries? And does it contribute to your own understanding of other cultures? Anyone read in translation? There's Manasi.
Unfortunately, the only language I can read fluently is English, so no. But hopefully one day.
I'm trying to think though of poetry in translation. It's tough. Well, haikus, of course, basho. Anything?
Ghazals are a really fun form of poetry that are often in translation. Not always. There's one by Jericho Brown, I think called Huddle. I don't want to get this wrong, so let me look that up real quick. But it's a gorgeous piece of work, and it really shows how like forms from like very different countries and cultures can be transformed under the voice of a poet. I'll send a link to that as well in the chat.
I think Rumi got me in, like, I'm trying to think of the first poets in translation I probably read. And I remember going through a whole Rumi phase. You guys, are you someone ready to share their own poem? Or are we going to go east to west? All right, Anthony, you're on.
Hello, I almost said bonjour, wrong class, wrong everything. This is a poem I wrote. Once again, it's kind of like on the summer theme. It's called July Moonlight. It isn't, a lot of my poetry is very serious and talks about social justice issues, but I really enjoy when I can write a poem about joy and kind of going off that theme for tonight. So this is just an ode to my childhood summers. The screen door slams, chicken fries in the skillet as bacon grease gels on the back of the stove. Sweet red Kool-Aid swims down my throat, making love in my belly with green tomatoes and corn and watermelon and salt. The back porch still smells like smoke from yesterday's cookout. Ribs and potato salad are tucked tightly in the fridge. We catch fireflies in mason jars, swat away gnats and mosquitoes in the dusky glow of July moonlight. I smell like outdoors and the sweet musk of summer sweat. Cold showers and electric fans are my evening lovers. Tonight, the harmony of crickets and cicadas and the whistle of a distant freight train lullaby me to sleep.
That makes me homesick. You wouldn't know it, but it feels like an East Coast summer in San Francisco, in the Bay Area right now. I think it's like 80 degrees. Isabella, you're next on our geographic tour.
Absolutely. This is actually one of my most recent poems. It was inspired by my grandmother, actually. So, and a little bit of, it mentions a little bit about the pandemic, but just go ahead. I called my grandmother today because her voice still finds the strength to rumble from her diaphragm and chest. Her lungs still expand and contract to breathe life into the Spanish my tongue gets caught on every so often. Her arthritic hands still bear needle and thread as her words reverberate along the fabric of our distance. I called my grandmother today because her heart still beats with depth of poetry and iambic pentameter, and because she can still bring her mouth and lips to say there's more hope than hopelessness out there. If only the world had half of her 83 years of wisdom and optimism, and I know we're still learning, but there are communities and frontliners still yearning for their lives and to stop hurting, and our heroes continue to be left unsung if the hymns we hum fail to be in unison. My grandmother and I are just two songbirds chirping a silent chorus if we fall on deaf ears. So listen for when we call and feel the power of our spirit and rhythm, the strength of our voice and chest and lungs, and let it settle on your tongue like thread. It hooks onto the back of your teeth and sews together the body. From heart to mouth to lips and to what's at large, a community of love and loss, and realize that the tethering of it all is poetry, and that what courses through our veins is not blood, but the strangers.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. I'm trying, I think Maddy, Minnesota's east of Katy, Texas, right?
I think so. I'm not totally sure. This is going to be a little bit of an odd poem. I wasn't sure if there was going to be kids in the audience, so I steered clear of my many poems that have some foul language in them. These I wrote based off of AI generated text. I was doing work for well below minimum wage over the summer, having to do with AI generated text and how it can mirror human speech. So to keep myself focused, kind of, I collected words and phrases and turned them into poetry. So here's a small taste of that. Venture. Look at the road and everything around it. It just looks so real. I can imagine the dinosaurs walking across this place. The simple majesty of trees. With luck, they will outlive the road and all of us. Trees are a higher power. Where will the path inside lead? Oh my gosh, I can't talk, I'm so sorry. I am as adventurous as a funky hat. Oh my, what is that thing? Breathtaking indeed, and that it reminds me of my loved ones. That chandelier thing really is bright and beautiful. I could just curl up underneath it. It's everything I ever wanted. Bright, fury, kind. So yeah, that was none of my words. I just put it in different places.
Wow. Thank you. All right, Ethan.
Okay. This is, I'm not really sure, but this is one of my newer ones as well. Looking back, I'm not too sure what I was thinking when I wrote it, but I'll go ahead and read it. It's called Salt, Salt, Salt. And it's sudden, but I've never known the sky display clouds into the open lives or this bellicosity of mine. cousin. And by God, did you ever hear of the river in the sea? It must bleed salt within itself, and yet does not boil over hell. Some days the air is my own, and the sun-bloom spot scorches. Some days I hear the wind more a recitation than a lullaby. I could never write a song, so the line goes. Every note must ache to play or to know, and whosoever let me speak, for words more elegantly free.
Thank you. Okay, a question for all of you, and we'll come back to you, Manasi. Let us know when it's quieted down. Where do you guys, we've had this, I've had this conversation with other National Student Poets, but not with you guys. Not everyone who's a National Student Poet has any vision or dream of going on to be a poet or even necessarily a writer, which is totally cool. What are you guys thinking? Where do you see yourselves in 5 years, 50 years, whatever you want, whatever horizon you want to share?
I think I definitely probably speak for everyone here. I definitely struggle with this question a lot, but I think for myself, as I mentioned before, for me, poetry has always been advocacy. And while I'm not necessarily sure that I would like to be a writer in the future, even though that's something I would like to continue to do, I think that anywhere I would see myself would be continuing that advocacy. So directly working with communities where I can advocate for them and help provide resources. So I'm not exactly sure what that means, but currently in terms of what I want to study in college, I am looking to political science or something in the field of government where I can directly help people in sort of similar in the ways that I've been able to provide poetry to communities. I want to do that, but at a larger scale and with more resources.
Awesome. I'm you know, the Academy of American Poets has these fellowship awards from the Mellon Foundation, and any poet laureate, so state or local, county, can apply. And we're just going through the review process now. And it's amazing to read all of these proposals from poets who are all about community change, using poetry to for community organizing or connection or social justice. That makes me really proud. Who else can share their, I could not tell you where I'm going to be in 5 years, but what do you guys, what's your vision?
I'll go. In 5 years, well, I'll technically still be in college since I'm a junior now. But after my college years, I would like to teach, whether that be at like the highest, like K through 12 level or the collegiate level. I personally feel that the best way to give back is through teaching. And I don't necessarily mean like working in education, but I mean just like teaching. Like you learn something, you just tell anybody. Like that's how I've learned. That's how I've acquired so much knowledge throughout the years, has been from my teachers, whether that be like my in-school teachers or like my grandmother's stories, or you know, all the books I've read in my childhood. I've always learned and I've always been taught something. So whether that be me teaching history, which has always been my first love and passion, or writing and teaching English, I just want to give back. And I want to, especially if I'm to teach anything to do remotely with writing, I want to give back in the form of telling people that it's okay to not always have to write about a book or have to write some fantastical story. Your story is okay. And you, what you are doing, how you're living, what your world is, that's not only okay to write about, but that's what you should be writing about. And I just want to teach and give back in the best way that I can.
Manasi, can you share a poem or a future vision?
Yeah, sure. It's quieted down now. So do you want me to read or should I just, okay, sure. Like I said, I don't know, I haven't been able to write a lot of new stuff recently, so I'm just gonna read an old poem. Okay, this is called Cut Glass. Mama tells me there are men who measure themselves by the shadows they cast. In the war years, they ripped softness from the earth like bread and held it in their teeth. I was not to be baptized in the blackened throat of a rifle. This is how to leave home. In the underbelly of a truck with 3 teeth bared and passport shredded under tongue. Well, I suppose it is a story well known. Boats break upon banks and suture bodies onto the shore. We are so tired of anthems and children's things. I am trying to weep for the rubber factory and the boy I kissed behind it, trying to remember what it felt like to deliver my baby sister in the bedroom beside the mango grove. What it felt like to bear the weight of another heart, cavernous. Like thumbing through a photo album of the dead grandmother you never listened to. Oh, Mama, memory will always load the gun, and morning will find us scattered into lace. There are men who excavate graveyards from white skies and hold their children as they would a gun. We will take this new country and wear it like a coat.
Thank you so much. Anyone else before we close out? Thoughts, if you didn't get to speak about either your service project or where you think the road you're on might take you. Ethan, I'm dying to know where you think you might, what calls to you?
So far, I'm still really indecisive about what I'm ultimately going to end up doing, but I feel like going forward, like my number one priority, I feel like at this point, is still trying to get to know more about, I guess, the world in general. But a big part of that is I already have like ideas that I'm thinking about like my opinions of, I guess, how the world should be or what I think is like wrong with the world in certain ways. And I think that a big part of fleshing that out and developing what I would find is my way to like kind of combat that is like to keep on going. And I think as of right now, all I'm really thinking about is how do I build enough of my repertoire in order to face those issues that I think are the biggest issues.
Wow, you guys are amazing. It's been a different year, and you really, like the whole planet, but you really like kind of stuck with it and surfed the uncertainty. I can't thank you enough, and I'm absolutely determined to get us all together so you can have that part of the National Student Poet experience. Even if it's as alumni, we'll make sure that's part of your experience. Colin, you're back. And Hannah.
Yeah. Oh, it's been so great just to listen in and eavesdrop and hear the poems and the thoughts. So Olivia, thank you again. It's one of the benefits of Zoom, right? We definitely want to be in person, but here we are, like, wow, right? How profound. We can all just gather like this, and we're really excited to share this, you know, in the replays with a wide audience. It's really just inspirational. So I've got one question that I'm going to ask our poets, and you're going to have a minute to think about it because I want to shout out to Hannah again here and ask her a question too. But when I come back to the poets, it's going to be that question, like, you know, what's your advice for the young poet who doesn't even know they're a poet, you know, for any child, you know, and for why write, why care, why poetry, you know, that question. So I'm going to come back. We can go west to east this time. We'll come back on that one. But Hannah, could you just again, for the young poets and students out there that are now interested and want to know more about this program, where to go, what's happening?
Yeah, so check out artandwriting.org.
Mhm.
Fairly straightforward, and you can find more information about the National Student Poets Program there and how to submit your own poetry and other types of writing and visual art through the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. And I received awards when I was a high school student, so I'm very passionate about it, have been for a while. Yeah, and just definitely check out artandwriting.org for more information about the program.
Fantastic. And it's a great combination of organizations and partnership, their collaboration. And let's see, Olivia, I'm not going to let you off the hook here with one last question too, but just can you tell us why you founded this program? Like, what was that need, or just what was that inspiration really?
So I was a Obama true believer. We like made no sense for our family, but we uprooted, moved to Chicago, and went all in on the Obama campaign. And when against the odds, we felt the Obamas prevailed. I worked with Michelle Obama at the beginning. I mean, that's an exaggeration. I ran the Women for Obama website and chronicled what she was doing on the campaign trail. But when we made it to Washington and I was appointed to the President's Committee on the Arts and the Humanities, I took that opportunity really seriously and thought, okay, how can I channel this couple and this movement? Really, they were a movement. And youth voice and the arts and giving back, investing in youth and then asking them to give back was, I thought, a way to do that. And I was a poor student poet, but also it's something anybody can do. It's not a resource dependent art form. So that seemed like a good way to engage kids and get them sort of off their screens and looking inside. It was so wonderful at the beginning to hear you guys talk about COVID and how it the sort of isolation forces some introspection, and how that can also be a produce writer's block. But so that was the inspiration. And every time, we started actually by doing workshops with 8260C with younger kids. And every time we would do something, Mrs. Obama would say, "Oh, that's good, that's good, that's great, but nothing bigger, do more." So after a couple of years, we created the National Student Poets Program. And then in their last year, we added a poet ambassador component through a grant through NEH, which was how Amanda Gorman first met Mrs. Obama. And we all met Amanda Gorman. But so anyway, that's how it got started. And it's just been, if you are dogged and you believe in something, there is a way.
Yeah, well, you have certainly shown, pioneered in many ways there. So really just grateful for all the work that you're doing, nationally and certainly in California. Really appreciate your leadership. All right, so back to the final words here. Manasi, we'll start on the West Coast. Is the plumbing working? We just need to know first if we're okay.
I honestly don't know, but the noise stopped, so I'm gonna guess that that's a good thing.
All right, and tell what Bay Area city are you in?
I'm in the South Bay in a little town called Saratoga.
Oh.
Not a lot of people have heard of it, so
Yeah, well, we know.
I just say South Bay.
Yeah, good. All right, well, we're gonna connect with you again here for some fun poetry with America Scores Bay Area here, if you're willing, at some point soon. But for now, what advice would you give to the young student about, who thinks, why poetry, or why should I care?
I think if it calls to you, just go for it. I think what I think Olivia was saying was like, what's really beautiful about poetry and writing is there's no barriers at all. Like, you don't even have to know how to write or read, to be honest. Like, there's a very long history of oral storytelling in many cultures and many regions, and that's kind of manifested itself in spoken word like today. And I think there's just so many different ways you can get involved with writing and poetry. And I think what I've noticed from all the writers I've met is they're often a lot more reflective about themselves and the world. I think there's a lot you can learn just from, you don't have to like start like, oh, I need to like craft the perfect poem. Like, no, just start journaling. Just start writing your thoughts down in a notebook or something. I think it's a very healing process, and it's a really good process for introspection, and you learn a lot about yourself and what really interests you when you're writing poetry. I think like throughout my life, I've shuffled between interests, but what's been constant is that I was able to explore all of them through writing and through language. It's like there are no barriers or no expectations or anything. So that's why I love it so much. And I think like the most important thing is, have no fear, don't hesitate. You don't feel pressured to share, don't feel pressured to be good. None of that really matters at all.
Right. Well said. Lots of shaking heads in agreement. Maddy, can you add to that eloquent description?
Absolutely. I definitely want to second what Manasi said about journaling. I feel like that's a fantastic entry point into using words just because you want to use them, using them because they make you happy and because you enjoy the way they sound and look together on the page. And I think that happiness is what is so key to starting out in poetry and sustaining yourself in poetry, reading and watching and listening to what makes you happy, writing and speaking what makes you happy. I think that's central, and it's a beautiful thing.
Isabella, you want to add into that? I mean, how important is reading, maybe just in your opinion, and just what else might inspire people to write?
I think reading is one of the most important aspects of being a writer, because I think, especially reflecting on when I was younger, that's really how I got into writing. I was really inspired by reading. I love to read. And I think that my advice for sure for a person who is interested, a young poet, would be read as many poets as you can, engage with poetry as much as you can, because I think that will always be your greatest inspiration. And especially for myself, being part of a community of spoken word, of slam poetry, my biggest inspiration has always been my peers, and like the people that I look up to the most are fellow youth poets that I am consistently impressed by and inspired by. So I would say engage with poetry as much as you can. And I would also like to add a little bit on why poetry, in my opinion. I think, as everyone has been saying, I think poetry is very accessible. As we've said, I think anyone can really get involved in poetry. And I think a lot of people underestimate their ability to be a poet. And I truly do believe that everyone can be a poet. And that can mean a lot of different things for different people. But I think that as long as you have a story, you have poetry in you. So that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, encouraging words, and thank you again for sort of reminding us of the community, the communal spirit of that. We sort of joke that poetry is a team sport, but it really does help connect us, as listeners and as voices within that community. So your remarks remind me of that. Let's see, Anthony. What else can we say about why Ethan? It's going to be hardest for you going last year, but you got the most time to think about it. Anthony, what would you say?
Well, to the question why poetry, I would respond, why not poetry? Because what better thing do you have to do than poetry, than to sit down with a blank piece of paper or a blank document or whatever you might be writing from and just write. You don't have any rules. You don't have to have like for instance, on essay, you don't have to have like 5 paragraphs. You don't have to like think of a thesis, you know, you can just write, you can play around with words, rearrange them on the page, change what words you want to use. You have no limits. There's nothing stopping you when you're writing poetry. So why not just, in a way, just dip your feet in the water and then take off swimming, you know? And I think also it should be said that I say this so much, but like truly, you have a home in poetry, because for so many of, I'm sure like my other fellow national student poets can relate to this, but like, for instance, well, I guess I won't speak for y'all, but like myself, and I know of a lot of other poets, but when the world isn't your home, when the world isn't welcoming, when the world isn't your refuge, or when your own home isn't your refuge, you know, you have a home in poetry. You have this entire medium in which you can write about your deepest, darkest thoughts. You can write about what you hope to achieve from the world, what you desire, and what you hope to believe, and what you hope to see in this world. And you truly do have a home in poetry. Poetry is, I believe, one of the best things you can do in terms of writing, because you can, like I said, there's nothing stopping you. You can write about anything, and it's such a healing thing when you write poetry, especially when you're writing about your world and when you're writing about yourself. And you'll come away from it feeling satisfied, and you'll come away from it, even if it might seem like a daunting task, you know, you'll feel accomplished in some way, shape, or form. So just why not poetry?
Yeah. All right. 2 things. One, you know, this is going to be part of a video on the SCORE's website. Each of your answers to this question is so powerful. That was really well said. And I also think you have the slogan for the summit now. You have a home in poetry. So we'll all be getting T-shirts and swag here with, you know, the new slogan. So thanks for that. All right, Ethan, you got the last word on why poetry.
I think one of the main things is that I feel everyone should have an outlet. And by that, I mean, like, we've been going on about, I feel everyone's already expressed kind of an idea about how when you feel something that you really need to express, or something you can't, like, in a way keep bottled up within you, that you have to like put it out there. And poetry is the way I guess most of us here do it. But I think a big part of that is that since it is one of those verbal forms, verbally, I feel like you can express a lot. That might just be like the way I think about this kind of stuff. But verbally, it feels as if you can express a lot more about the details of what you're going through. And poetry especially is really good in the way that I think the forms are really not limiting. Like, you can do almost anything on a piece of paper with words, and then you can call it poetry. So that I think that freedom is a really big part of why, if you get anyone into writing, I think a really good way to interest them into the writing is to start off with poetry, is to get them into writing their own poetry, because you're not like monitoring them. And even if you're not telling them to do any specific thing, you're basically giving them the ability to do whatever they want to do with their words. And I think that's a really big reason to why poetry.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's accessible, it's safe, it's brave, it's connecting with others, it's playful, it's fun, right? It's liberating. So all those great things. Well, thank you again for your sharing and for your advice and inspiration on that. Olivia, I'll give you the last word here. Anything that you want to say in summary to wrap up before we go walk our dogs and do our homework and whatever else we got to do here?
I'm, as always, so like verklempt and overwhelmed by the National Student Poets. And they give me so much hope and joy, just knowing that you're out there, and you, as much as the world is screwed up, like there's some hope that you will inherit it. And it's really validation of the investment that that intention from a decade ago. Thank you so much, Colin and Alicia, for giving us this platform and the work that you guys do, preparing the next generation of national student poets and good citizens and good human beings. Thank you for having us.
No, it's our pleasure and our honor. And Isabella, thank you for this link here. Melissa Lozada, Olivia. This is what I'm going to do next, right? Is watch the video, How to Survive the Zombie Apocalypse, because that's kind of what, like, I feel like what we're in here right now. So let's find some joy. Let's find some happiness. Let's find, we're with you, simpatico, and the power, the transformative power of the words and your voice and poetry and the amazing causes that you're all tapped into. So thank you. And thanks to everybody for being here live, and for those that are watching the replay, check out some of the other sessions. There's some great voices to be heard. So we hope to see you again, and thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.